In Houston, Texas, officials and Governor Greg Abbott reaching an agreement restoring cooperation between the Houston Police Department and federal immigration authorities after the Houston City Council passed an ordinance restricting HPD interactions with ICE officers enforcing final deportation orders. The state announced they were withdrawing over $114 million in public safety grants. An amended ordinance and a new HPD directive now align with state grant requirements and federal law. The governor confirmed the funding would be restored following compliance. Now, the move followed constructive conversations between the mayor and the governor amid ongoing lawsuits and pressure on other cities like Austin and Dallas. Now, this development came against the backdrop of another high-profile case in Houston. A 19-year-old Venezuelan national faces murder charges in the sledgehammer bludgeoning death of a carpenter. The suspect in that case, who entered the U.S. under prior parole policies and had a prior criminal history, was arrested driving the victim's vehicle. Officials highlighting the case as underscoring the risks from limited local federal cooperation, noting patterns in similar instances involving Venezuelan nationals. In Arizona, legal experts say that state law prohibits local restrictions on federal immigration enforcement taking precedent over city or county policies. Recent actions in Pima County and Phoenix banning or limiting ICE use of local property without permission has drawn complaints to the Attorney General. Analysts cite Arizona statutes and constitutional principles like the Supremacy Clause, noting that while localities aren't required to assist federal efforts, they cannot obstruct them. State law in Arizona is viewed as overriding conflicting local measures. Now, this runs contrary to some other local and state governments like Illinois and California, where state law there prohibits such cooperation. Leaders in these states, they argue, even in the judiciary, that state and local resources cannot be commandeered by federal officials to enforce federal law. Meanwhile, nationally, the U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments in a migrant parole case involving a Chinese national convicted of trademark counterfeit. Justices appeared skeptical of arguments that would broadly expand admissibility standards for individuals facing criminal suspicions or charges. The case examines the clear and convincing evidence standard for admissibility under parole and removal proceedings. A decision in that case expected by July. Down in Florida, the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld an earlier ruling keeping the so-called Alligator Alcatraz detention facility in the Everglades operational. The court blocked the lower court's order to wind down that site, citing issues with the challenger's claims under the Administrative Procedure Act. Other developments include the Atlanta City Council passing resolutions on immigration enforcement ahead of the World Cup, and reports of fugitives arrested in New England sanctuary areas on homicide charges. Now, what about the U.S. Department of Homeland Security funding? Congress has not passed the 2026 Homeland Security Appropriations Bill. It's the only remaining fiscal year 26 funding measure. This has resulted in a partial DHS funding lapse since mid-February, now exceeding 60 to 70 days, marking the longest partial government shutdown in U.S. history. Now, DHS agencies, including Transportation Security Administration, FEMA, Coast Guard, and Secret Service, they continue their essential operations with many employees working without pay, leading to reported airport delays and nearly $1 billion in delayed paychecks when combined with prior lapses. Now, ICE and border enforcement operations have largely continued due to prior supplemental funding from the Republicans' One Big Beautiful Bill, though officials note there are limitations. A Senate-passed hybrid Homeland Security bill would fund non-immigration components like TSA, FEMA, and others for the remainder of the fiscal year. But Washington U.S. Senator Patty Murray and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, they criticized Republicans wanting to fund an agency they say needs more accountability.
Republicans want to give $140 billion to ICE and Border Patrol. And these are agencies highly unpopular, unreformed with the American people. Their right wing is driving them over a cliff. Republicans are at each other's throats, tying their party up in knots.
I've not heard one Democrat say defund ICE.
Yeah.
What I have heard every single Democrat repeatedly say, When you fund ICE agents, then make sure they have training, make sure they have warrants, make sure they act like law enforcers, and have the ability to have the trust of the American people. That's what we're asking for.
Now, the Senate bill that funds DHS awaits action in the U.S. House. Republicans, they're advancing a separate budget reconciliation measure to provide additional immigration enforcement funding, including for ICE and CBP. Lawmakers are also beginning fiscal year 2027 appropriations discussions, with DHS agencies requesting approximately $63 billion. No full government shutdowns occurred, but the impasse has drawn criticism from both sides over priorities, with ongoing negotiations to resolve the lapse. Now, be sure to stay up on the latest on border issues and DHS funding by getting the newsletter from thecentersquare.com.